this edition, first edition of 2023 of the Miscoll Show. Thank you for taking time to join us today. The topic of our discussion today is the European EMS industry. And we've invited two guests, Markus Aschenbrenner, member of the executive board of Zollner Electronic, and Dieter Weiss, market researcher extraordinaire for the EMS industry, to join us and share their insights. Before we get to the questions, let me just cover a few housekeeping issues. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Phil Stoughton from Down Under. This is being recorded. Everybody listening in is muted. If you wish to pose a question, please use the question tab at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to integrate your questions as we move forward. And again, this is being recorded and will be rebroadcast later this week. So that said, let's move into it. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you both. Thank you for starting the new year with us. Dieter, as the market researcher in the room, why don't I just ask you to kind of comment on how 2022 ended for the EMS industry in Europe?
Well, for sure, we don't have all the results as of now. We just started our annual survey, which we are doing together with the IPC over here in Europe. And believe it or not, we already got first survey forms back today. And it is very interesting. If we start with the public companies over here in Europe, and the majority of the public companies are from Scandinavia. You remember it, Eric, we visited a lot of them. And from them, at the moment, we only have the 9 months results, which are still very interesting, because if I just read those numbers to you, Scanfil had 9 months revenue plus of 23%, Keytron 73%, Node 40%, Hansa 37%, and InCap 57%. And if we look at their predictions for the full year, I'm pretty much sure, I think the first one to report will be Node at the end of this month. They will be reporting outstanding numbers. Even we have this serious crisis on semiconductors, as if we believe some of those people. But in addition, we already got numbers from very small companies in today, and they as well report numbers between 20 to 40% revenue growth. And as you remember, we've done the survey after the first half of last year to find out how much of the expected increases would be price increases in comparison to quantity growth. And those days, the outcome was that it was about 1/3 price increases and 2/3 was quantity increase. So we have seen a tremendous increase in revenue growth, and I can already predict it's going to be a high 2-digit increase in at least in Western Europe. We have to be careful because, for example, I mentioned it in my email to you, Eric, there were some global players who are working in Eastern Europe, and they have had a 600 million decline in their fiscal year 2022. So it's not all bright, and the big difference is still what we are doing, the difference between East and West, because the East is more into the 3C, consumer, computer, and communication, and those markets have definitely suffered in 2022.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Markus, what are your comments? How was 2022 from your perspective?
First of all, 2022 was a tough year, obviously, because there were many issues which were not easy to deal with. If I look just at financials here at Zollner, we also grew a lot. So we grew by more than 40% last year, which is really a number because of our size that we already have in the meantime. And looking at the hurdles which have been there or the obstacles which have been there, I really have to say thank you to all our teams, because they did a tremendous job taking into consideration that you have the component issues, you have the demand fluctuations, you have small lot sizes that you passed through production because you wanted to fulfill each and every demand of the customers. With missing material, you had to cut lot sizes down to smaller portions. So there is a lot of, and then of course, the big thing is missing personnel, so staff. So that's taking all this into account. I think our teams did a great job last year, and but the year was tough with all the obstacles that I already mentioned, and I'm pretty sure that also the new year will be also a very interesting one, because there's a lot of things in addition to what we already had in the past, which is now coming on the surface, and so a tough year last year, but in terms of growth, a very successful year for us, of course, and also an interesting year ahead of us.
Markus, 40% is an incredible growth. How does that look across the different geographies? How has that been in the Americas? How's that been in Asia and Europe?
So we grew in each and every region, Phil. So there is not a big difference in terms of the growth that we did in the Americas versus here in Europe or in China. So we grew in each and every region, and also nearly in each and all the industries that we're serving. And the good thing is, and Dieter mentioned it already, is that we're not that heavy involved in the 3 Cs, which we're not suffering at all of, because we're not doing any big revenues there. And this was the main reason why we are seeing that growth in terms of our size that we have in the meantime.
Yeah. And as you got to the end of the year, how did demand look? And I guess it's too early to say what's going on at the beginning of this year, but are you seeing a softening in demand, which everybody seems to be expecting, but many European EMSs haven't felt yet?
I already said this in many occasions in the meantime. I do not trust the demand or the backlog that we have in our systems right now, because I'm pretty sure that it's wrong what we are seeing right now. Coming out of the last 2 years where we had that shortage situation and everybody was crying for volumes and products to be shipped, I think there was not a lot, but there is some double booking in the system that we still see in the system, because everybody is afraid of taking that demand out of the system, because nobody knows exactly what's coming, and so we still see double booking in the system. I'm pretty sure about that. That will be taken out of the systems over the next couple of weeks, I'm pretty sure, because everybody is seeing right now that the situation in the component industry is changing. Of course, we still have some areas where we have long lead times and of course shortages, but in most of the areas in the component industry, you see already that there's capacity available, that there's products available, parts available. You see a lot of inventories rising, and I'm pretty sure that Dieter has exact numbers on the inventory levels in the EMS industry, which grew by hell over the last 2 years. So there's a lot of components there in the meantime, not in all the categories, but in most of the categories. And I'm pretty sure that the OEMs are taking notice of that and will take out some of the demands over the next few weeks. So we will see a softening in backlogs. And the big question is, is there a recession coming or not? Where do we see a recession? Is it in the US, here in Europe, or how does China behave over the next few months in terms of the COVID situation? So there's a lot of weak things or uncertain things right now, and that will also have an influence on the demand signals that OEMs are putting out in the chain, and I'm pretty sure that we will see some softening. And if I look in our numbers here, we already saw a take back, not much, but a take back in our order backlog that we already have.
Yeah, I think there's that requirement for correction. There's that overhang. Just whilst you touched on it and brought the subject up of COVID, How, as someone with facilities in China, how are you dealing with that, and how much impact is that having on you at the moment?
I'm pretty sure that we will see the main impact after Chinese New Year, which is at the end of January, because right now I think they just really started with traveling in China, and the impact will come out of the Chinese New Year. I hope that the impact is not that heavy as we saw it, let's say, in the first quarter last year, where we had to shut down for 3 weeks. Right now we are still we are producing. Of course, we already have issues, and the people are very strict and stay at home and try to not affect the rest of the staff. So that's good. Right now we are in full production mode, and we are looking towards what is happening after Chinese New Year, and that will be the interesting thing in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a huge test, isn't it?
It is a huge test, definitely.
Yeah. Hey, Dieter, why don't you, we've touched on several things, or Markus did, and one of them that he referred to are the inventory levels. I mean, that's been a big burden on EMS. It's been wearing down, and not just in Europe, I know, but globally. But can you speak to that and what 2022 kind of looked like in those terms?
Well, the problem is a little complicated because what the companies have on inventories is actually not what they need. Those inventories, or people are still complaining about the shortage of materials, and I'm having had several discussions on LinkedIn with people who tell me, well, maybe I'm living in a different world, because what I hear is always just a shortage of semiconductors. And I say, well, yes, you're living in a different world. It is not just all semiconductors that are short. People who read Financial Times over the weekend have seen the headlines of Samsung already planning a reduction in semiconductor production because there is no demand for it. But again, semiconductor is not semiconductor. And that is what a lot of people who are spreading the arguments that semiconductors are short don't understand. Yeah, we are talking about some specific part numbers which are short, and they may even continue to stay short all of 2023. Yeah, we are talking about certain microcontrollers. We are talking about certain analog chips. Those are short, but the majority, let's say all memories. Yeah, hey, you see prices collapsing on that already. Yeah, but then the question has to be asked: what do companies have in inventory? What caused the high level of inventory with all the companies? And the reason to me so far is that companies did not give any reliable delivery dates anymore, from their distributors, even for ordinary components, and that caused buyers to be so afraid about not having all the components in stores that they bought everything. The full bill of materials was put to the distributors, and the distributors clearly said you only get a delivery date if you place a fixed order. And then comes this funny NCNR stuff from the distributors, which is not helping the situation either.
Hey, Dieter, if I can interject too, is there a sizing that you have? I know when we were together, you spoke about the level of inventory that's being held and the burden that is. Do you have some sizing around the average on that, what you were seeing?
Well, there is a slide which shows the 2021 numbers, and it shows that, and again, we have to be careful. I just did an analysis on the UK over the weekend, and for those companies who do not have the calendar year as their fiscal year, I can already have a look at their 2022 numbers already. Even so, in parts, they are actually 2021 numbers. But on those companies, I see out of about 50 companies, I see 9 companies who have less than 10% in inventories. But those are probably companies who have no problem with sourcing the material themselves, but they get the material from their customers. Yeah. So that is the only reason why they have so low inventory levels. All other like companies used to have inventory levels about 20%, and they have gone up in 2021 to above 35%. And we know already now that they have further increased in 2022 because we extended our annual surveys this year by the question what the inventory levels were end of 2021 in comparison to end of 2022. So that will be a very, very interesting analysis. And I can only tell you, it is worrying me a lot because this inventory has been eating up a lot of cash. Right. And with the inflation we are seeing at the moment and the interest rates rising, I can only say cash is king at the moment. And it will cause, and nobody can expect that he can solve his problems by getting additional cash. It's not going to be cheap.
Yeah.
No.
And there is also a psychological effect there, you know, because we were pushing the teams now for 2 years to get in material, to get in material, to get in material. And now you have to change the wheel and to say, hey, we have to be more careful there. We have to stop that. And that's not that easy. It's easier if you have a smaller organization, but the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to change that exactly to the other way.
To the opposite direction.
Side, you know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big challenge, isn't it? And I think it feels like the inventory challenges are going to be around for a while, but it is going to be about being able to make adjustments quickly and being able to see what's available, see what's real and what isn't real in terms of not just your bookings, but the allocations that you've got with your suppliers. That's going to be a lot about systems and a lot about processes, I guess, Markus, particularly in larger organizations like yours.
It is like that, but the more interesting thing, Phil, is to find out what is the real demand that customers have. And that's the interesting discussion right now, to get into the right levels of organizations and customers saying, hey, guys, we see your forecast. That's obvious, that's the numbers. But is that your real demand, and where's that demand coming from, and what are the effects which are in that demand, and that we can really take out in order to come to a real number there. And that's the interesting discussion right now.
Yeah. And are you finding customers are forthcoming with that, and they want to sit down and discuss that in detail and create some kind of visibility?
We already started that discussion already in the second half of last year, because and I already said, I said in many occasions that I don't trust the signals that we see in the supply chain, and this is exactly why we started that discussion with some of our customers in depth, in order to understand understand more clearly where is that demand coming from, and is the numbers real. And you'll find some areas where there's really where you come pretty quick to other demand signals.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm not taking that generally. It's not everywhere like that, but we see it.
Yeah. And, obviously this industry doesn't, operate in a vacuum. There's a lot going on in the world. Geopolitically, there's a lot of trends. And I hate using the term unprecedented, but these last few years probably have been in that regards, right? And whether we talk about, the issues in China, the war in the Ukraine, inflation, global warming, energy issues. I mean, these are all interrelated, causing that. But as I look at that and I see the big impact of what economies are doing, it really is the end of cheap money, right? So what impact do you think the end of cheap capital is going to have on the EMS industry then, Markus?
Yeah, there's two effects coming along. You have high levels of inventory that we just discussed previously. and you have high interest rates on the market, which comes along and which does hurt the organizations. That's for sure. And this is exactly why I said now it's the time to really go into depth into what is real demand and what of the inventory is then real and that you really need. And then it's speed. How fast can you get rid of some of the inventories on what prices? That's one thing that's already happened since weeks already in the market, and to find out, where can you sell what? That's one thing. And on the other side is also to look ahead and say, okay, and that's the uncertainty which is out there. What can happen and what of that demand or the components that you have in stock could be really held also for the future, because it makes sense in terms of some of the programs that okay, there's maybe a slight depth right now, but this is still coming, so keep it on stock. It's better than to get it rid, and then you have to purchase it maybe on a higher price in the future. That doesn't make any sense. So it's exactly that analyze that you have to take, but the start of that analyze is the demand signal of your customer. That's the start of that analyze, and out of that you can react, and then it's speed. And this is exactly why I said now is a psychological interesting fact, because we are in a phase or coming out of a phase where we push the teams to get material in, and now you have to be more precise there and change that attitude in some areas in order to avoid getting in more material where you don't need it, and that's exactly the psychological effect which is there, which you have to change fast, because otherwise, if you're not fast there, that's hurting you on the bottom line, because you have the thing that you said, that the interest rates are high, are rising, and there is no end right now. At least I don't see an end if you look what the US is doing or what Europe is doing right now. So, and that's hurting.
Yeah. And Dieter, how will this impact EMS companies at different tiers, small versus, I imagine larger ones might have the wherewithal to withstand some of this better than smaller tiered companies, but what's your opinion?
Well, looking back at my old analysis, I was able to always show that the big ones are growing faster than the small ones. This remains the case, especially you have to realize, for example, if a customer who yesterday only bought PCBAs finally realizes the real advantage of EMS manufacturing is to place a full product, a full module with the EMS company. Let the EMS company do the engineering as well, do the design, do the box building, and even go and ship it, the products directly to the end customer, and even have after sales service. Then immediately the order volume of a single customer becomes much bigger than just PCBA manufacturing. And in such case, it might happen, and it has happened, that the existing customers would have become too much dependent upon a single customer, and the customer had to either split the order and bring it to several suppliers, or even change a company, a supplier in full, which is a cause why big companies are growing faster than small ones. Having said that, it does not necessarily mean that small companies have no chance to survive. I think it's still this old saying that it's not the biggest who survives, it's the fastest who survives. You need to be fast in making decisions. You need to have your team together, and you need to plan ahead now what is going to happen in the next 2 years. And I can assure you the next 2 years for the service industry will be very challenging. And you have to start working on this now, and don't come back to me and tell me you already have all the solutions, because you pick the same solutions you have been taking the last 20 years. Put them in the bin. They're useless. Yeah. You have to face new realities, and you have to act accordingly, and that fast.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to act on the basis of the market. It was interesting what Dieter said there about the growth not being in necessarily all in PCBA or in, but actually in extensions of other parts of the business. Is that what you're seeing, Markus? Are you seeing greater demand for box build, complete systems?
I think that's
fulfillment.
Phil, I think that's also a matter of fact of the global situation that we're actually seeing, because if it continues, what we saw over the last 1 or 2 years is that the market is getting more regional. So we're going away from the global market. Production is on one place and you ship it to anywhere else in the world. So that's changing right now. It's changing since weeks, month already, and that will lead to the situation that the demand is produced where the demand is, and not in one place and shipped all over the globe. So that will change, and that also has, or one of the consequences there is that EMS companies will see more requests of doing complete systems, because the OEMs are not able to do it on one place, so they have to rely on partners doing their products also in China or in the US or wherever in the world. So there will be a demand of localization, and if you are able to do so on a complete system integration basis, of course that's a big advantage there. And this is exactly what we're going to see, or why I think, Phil, that the level of system integration at EMS will rise. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, but that's just one reason.
Yeah, and when you look at that distribution around the world, which clearly is changing, and there's pressure on some from some OEMs. You look at what Apple are doing with shifting some of their production, and you look at your own global footprint. Do you feel that balance is pretty good at the moment, or
it's not? It's not.
How are you feeling?
It's not, Phil, because we are still very European dominated, and that will be for many years, because we're a European company for sure. But we're doing a lot of steps towards that trend that we already see since a while already. And remember, we made an acquisition in the US on the East Coast, acquiring 3 sites of a smaller EMS company in order to have the ability to also on the one thing be faster in the US market, because what Dieter was saying is you have to be very agile and fast in your decisions and in your portfolios that you can offer to your customers. And on the other side, having then also the needed floor space, the needed people in order to do some transfer or local manufacturing there. So that was one of the moves that we made in the Western territory. In Asia, we are well established in China. We have our Taichung plant. We are just opening the another time extension there in the first quarter this year. So we have enough capacity for what we see as a demand in China right now in order to exactly fulfill what we think will happen, that there's some movements also going into China because of that segregation of the market. So that will also happen, not just China, getting out of China, but there will be also some moves into China. I'm
some regionalization.
Sure. Right. Especially for complete systems integration. And this is where we are prepared for. And the weak spot that we still have is Southeast Asia. That's something that we consider in order to investigate what we're going to do there.
Yeah.
You touch on the issue in there of your acquisition of the U.S. and expanding the footprint. So let's get into that, the whole M&A side. And that's also balanced by, there's the acquisition, but there's also the factory expansion that's going on within the industry and to a degree, some greenfielding by some companies. So, Dieter, I know you look at this, the M&A activity. How was, maybe looking back at 2022, how would you characterize the M&A activity in the industry in Europe?
Well, you remember the chart on M&A activity in Europe in 2021. We had a total of 37 acquisitions or mergers. In 2022, it was 37 again, with one difference. We started tracking PCB activities as well, because we realized that smaller PCB companies who are still operating in Europe were being acquired by distributors, large European distributors who are sourcing the majority of their product in China. So that has become an interesting movement, and we know that there is only about 160 PCB manufacturers left in Europe, and me and as well IPC is very worried about this situation. We have a total dependence on Chinese PCB, and nobody seems to care. Yeah, it's just about price.
Right.
That's nice, but it's short-sighted. And on the EMS side, we have had 29 acquisitions last year. But we have a lot of requests for acquisition. There is a lot of money flowing around at the moment. We get calls from investment banks. We get calls from venture capital companies who all want to invest. And if we look at the hype 3 years ago on fintech companies and other companies in the software technology, I can tell you that that hype is gone. Yeah, the new hype seems to be hardware, and in specific, somebody must have spread the message: "Hey, EMS industry is very, very good business." Unfortunately, there is only few companies who have an EBITDA of more than 10%. So that is the biggest problem, and venture capital companies are looking at results in present, in specific, and the strategy of just increasing your revenues is definitely gone. You need to increase your profits. Yeah, you need the cash. Yeah, right. And you cannot solve your problems by taking up additional credits. Yeah.
Right.
So,
hey, Dieter, but it strikes me that what's been interesting from the European EMS industry in their M&A activity is the expansion out of Europe, right? I find it very interesting. Markus, you talk about your recent you always had North America in both in Costa Rica and on the West Coast, but you did the acquisition on the East Coast. We see other European EMS doing the same, they're not huge acquisitions, but I call it a toehold, right? Putting a toehold in the market, starting to serve, and probably looking to grow in the future would be my guesstimate. Is that the strategy that you see happening as well, Dieter?
Well, first of all, there is, to say so, few European companies who are big enough to take this step to go and look for acquisition in North or Middle America. Yeah, it is Zollner, it is Kartek, and a couple of more. Yeah, but everybody who has, let's say, less than 200 or 300 million in revenue is probably too small to take the approach to go to America, and doesn't have as well the resources in the management to look after that. If I look at Zollner, for example, they have absolute experts who do nothing else but look at the different world global markets. And in actual fact, in some cases, when I have discussions with Zollner, I always get this feeling they know this market better than me, which is making me a bit jealous because they have such experts.
That's not true what you're saying, because you know exactly that we have just 1 or 2 people taking really care about what you're actually saying, and we have no team doing any M&As because we usually don't do any M&As. Right. But the reason why we did the one in the US was speed, nothing else. Yeah. We wanted to be in the market at the right time, and if we would have done a greenfield, it would have taken too long. And this is exactly why we made that move in the US. And maybe I can answer a little bit of what you were saying, Eric. What I'm expecting is that we're going to see some M&A activities, I'm pretty sure, and also a rising number of M&A activities. The one is the situation that we already discussed of the financial situation of company. I'm pretty sure that this will get worse for some of the companies because of the stock levels that we discussed, the shrinking demand that we're going to see, and that will have just one result. And of course we will see some of those M&A activities, and the other one will be if the shortage, not on the component side, on the people side, on the staff side, will continue as it is right now. And I'm also pretty sure that this is getting worse. Then there will be some acquisitions exactly taking that into consideration, that you buy a company in order to get the people on board that you need there because they have the resources, you know. So that's what I'm pretty sure what we're going to see in Europe. And what you were saying, Eric, is and that's also what we did a part last year when we announced that we're going to go more to North Africa as we did in the past. So we're drawing a bigger circle around Europe right now because we think that in Eastern Europe, you don't find enough capacity also for the next few years to come, taking into consideration that there's business coming back from Asia into Europe. So that's exactly why we draw the circle a little bit closer around Central Europe, going into North Africa, because we think that there is still capacity available down there. There's people available down there, and the dimension going into Central Europe from Tunisia versus from, let's say, North Macedonia or Bulgaria or something, there's no big difference. And that's exactly what I'm pretty sure what we're going to see in Europe, that there's some movement like what I described right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting. And I did want to touch on the labor issue with you, because I think of it in terms of, you know, the electrification of everything in the world, right? And then we're dealing with increased automation within the industry as a way of dealing and handling a lot of that, because the labor arbitrage game is mostly over in the industry, right? It's not as crazy as it used to be. And then it comes down to the labor issues and the labor challenges within that. And I think about those, and I, you know, you have the blue collar and the white collar, and I know, Dieter, you speak of it in those terms as well. And it's really the white collar then that is the labor challenge, is it not?
I think it's blue collar as much. I think it's in the US. I think it's blue collar more. I spoke to someone yesterday who talked a lot about a mismatch in terms of talent that's available. You know, Twitter might have let a few thousand people go, but they're not people that are going to work on the lines at EMS companies. And they're certainly not people that are going to serve you coffee in San Francisco or wait tables at the restaurant. And that's where a lot of the talent shortages seem to be at the moment.
I agree, Phil. It's both. It's blue and white collar. Of course, everybody is addressing the labor issue right now in doing automation, digitalization, all that kind of stuff, but it's not fast enough. So, you know, you can't. And if you look at production, you know, of course, it's easy to automate high volume products or mid volume products. But if you go into the low volume, high mix arena, if you combine this with system integration, and then let's talk about this. How would you automate that? It's partly possible, but not for all possible. And this is exactly why I'm saying, Phil, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's both. It's white collar and blue collar that we're talking about. And also digitalization in the administrative world is also not fast enough that we can get rid of, or that we can gain enough free resources out in the white collar basis in order to deal with the growth that we're going to see in the next couple of years, but we're not talking about the next 2 years. Of course, we have that issue right now, but we have to look at the long run. And if I look at the long run, electronic industry will grow. And there's rising demand of people over the next 10 years. And we're talking about that dimension. And if I look at this one, this is an imminent issue. That's an issue which was there already for years, but it was, of course, not that prominent because the component issue was more dominating. But we have the issue of missing labor force in blue and white collar already for a while. And it's getting harder and harder the more we come into the growth area again. After a short dip that we're going to see over the next couple of months because of recession and all the kind of things that we already touched a little bit on already. But on the long run, that's the issue that we have to solve, all of us.
I think there's definitely an amplification there. And if we just touch back on what you mentioned earlier, that there's a growth in the industry that isn't just PCBA. PCBA is pretty automized, and the box build, the configuration, the ship to order, all that kind of stuff isn't, and that's where we need to do work. And it just feels that we've been talking about this digital transformation opportunity for 10 years, and suddenly it's urgent, and we haven't really done enough. And I don't know whether that's because technology wasn't ready or we didn't quite embrace it at the speed we should have. But I think we're kind of paying the price a little bit for not really having got as far through the fourth industrial revolution as we perhaps could have.
And I think it's not that easy as we thought it might be.
No.
Having all those nice tools and everything, because it's not just having the tools, it's implementing the tools, having the processes there. It's not just buying a software tool. That's easy. But then to really take advantage out of it, that's hard work. And I think we were a little bit too optimistic saying digitalization, automation, that will do a lot in order to overcome that
mitigate that.
It's not fast enough, and that's what I'm saying.
No. It might do it in 10 years, but that's not when we have the problem. We have the problem in
but we're going to see growth over the next years, Phil.
So we still need to push forward with that. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Markus, I do want to ask, as an EMS company too, how have the customers been? How have the OEM side? It's a voice that sometimes it's challenging to access. So I always ask EMS companies how those relationships have evolved and how has that been over the last year or two for you?
Of course, the last 2 years that has been hard because there was demand there that most of us in the EMS world couldn't fulfill, and that's always a friction and in the whole situation. But overall, I think everybody knew after a while that we are all sitting in the same boat, and you can't do it just throwing the ball over the fence saying, hey, deal with it, and off you go. It's a common thing that I think everybody recognized over the last 2 years that we have to really deal as a common thing with. And that's what I noticed with most of our customers, that they say, okay, we now have understood the situation. We give you long-term forecast, which was really a hard work to deal with, that we got really for 2 years of forecast in the beginning of all the crisis, because nobody realized it that fast and was not able to give the forecast and all that kind of stuff. So, but after a while, I think everybody was really realizing that we're sitting all in the same situation. We have to deal as an industry with what we're facing with. So that was the good thing out of it. And many of those customers reacted really very sorrowful and really understandable or understood the situation, and that was the good thing over the years. Now we are in another situation where we have to dig more into, as I said, what is the real demand that we see chain out there. So we have another sort of discussion right now, but I think coming out of the last few years, also the soil is very fruitful in order that you can have that discussions on a very open basis. So it will be more important now for all of us in the EMS industry to get that momentum which is there out of that crisis so pointed into the right direction in order that we also deal with the issues that we're going to see over the next years with the geopolitical things and with the localization things to get that right, set up right for the whole industry. That will be the interesting thing now and for the next month to come,
Yeah, I think that's huge, Markus, and what you talk about in terms of that open communication, that ongoing communication, that constantly asking the next question and the next question, and creating that collaboration. I actually think a lot of EMS companies have done a really good job of that, because you have had to go back to your OEM customer, the brands, and say, hey, this isn't going to happen because of this. Right. So let's figure out what we do need to do. So we've built that. I think, I know Eric's going to ask us to wrap up with some advice, but I think when I look at the companies that I think are going to be successful in 2023, it's those that already have that open, collaborative, communicative, honest dialogue with their customers that are going to do well, but also companies that have that further down in their supply chain and can really leverage the way the component distribution industry operates and can really help them to kind of renew their model and have a model that is agile enough for what we know is going to be a very challenging year ahead.
And that's the only thing how you can deal with the situation that we see in the world right now, because we are coming out of the phases where you could have planned for 2 to 3 years. No, it was a no-brainer because it was stable. Everything was going in a smooth direction. Now
orders were signed.
The world is changing dramatically. So what you have to do is you have to be very agile. You have to be very flexible, and that's just working with the right level of communication. And that's one of the most important things, which I think has to be talked about, with the right visibility into the supply chain. That's one of the key things, because if I look at all the ESG things coming up and all that kind of stuff, which is driven by some of the organization, by the governments and all that kind of stuff, that's just possible to deal with if you have the right level of transparency in the supply chain and the right level of data available in the supply chain, that you can really deal with those topics. And that's one of the key things which where we are not at the right, let's say, level in the whole electronics world right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Markus. People always used to talk about the glass factory with visibility in, so you could see what's going on. Everybody now talks about the glass pipeline, a supply chain that has visibility, and that's clearly more important than knowing what placement machine a particular product's on. You need to know where the components are, when they're going to arrive.
Right. And not just where they are, but what is their carbon footprint, through the whole manufacturing cycles and that
surgical
kind of stuff.
Surgical traceability is absolutely key. And I was just writing a piece about surgical traceability in a zero trust supply chain environment, and that feels like where we're going at the moment. So,
Before I ask you for any advice you care to offer, let me just ask about 2023, your view of it looking ahead. Dieter, I know you look at numbers a lot, comparing, I think we've had, based on the numbers you were sharing before, the growth in 2022 over 2021, it's been quite substantial. The sentiment that I tend to hear is that it's not going to be as substantial next year, right? So what are you seeing? What are your thoughts on what 2023 might bring for the industry?
Well, I've given a forecast earlier this year at Electronica for 2023, and I said the heat from 2022 will be off in 2023. Still, we're going to see a substantial growth due to the fact that the order books are still filled, and if we look at placing additional orders into the industry, we get a feedback, well, come back in the fourth quarter of 2023, or some companies even say come back in middle of 2024. So we will see a substantial growth in 2023 as well, but I have strong doubts that for all of Europe in combination, it will be a 2-digit growth. It might be a high 1-digit growth, which is still strongly supported by Western European companies, as the real big players in Eastern Europe are still working on the 3C, which I do not see any pickup at the moment. I don't know what the outcome of CES in Las Vegas this year will be, where there is substantial new product innovation. We'll have to wait and see, but still a high one-digit growth rate for 2023. Let's be happy about it, and let's solve our real problems, getting inventories down, getting cash in, making sure that companies are solvent.
And handling the whole labor issue.
Handling the whole labor issue, again, as Markus said, yes, automation is part, but it doesn't answer everything. If you're working in high mix, low volume, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be even a problem whether you can install cobots to help you further improve the situation. And again, cobot means investments.
Yeah, exactly.
Investments means cash. Cash has become expensive.
Cobots as a service, that's what we need.
Yeah, Markus, I won't ask you to offer any advice to your EMS competitors, but I will ask is kind of as we look ahead, what's your kind of general prognosis looking forward for the industry?
So on the long run, and that's what I already said previously, on the long run, electronics industry will grow. There is no doubt about that. There are so many things happening, so many new developments and trends, which will lead, as a matter of fact, to growth in the electronics industry in the long run. On the short run, I'm going to see a dip for sure. All the financial numbers, if you look at financials in the US, the only conclusion that I can take out of what I see is that there has to be a recession that has to show up, even if the Inflation Reduction Act will take place, but that will take a while until the money is spent, until all things are clear. So there will be a slight dip for sure, and I agree to what Dieter is saying. If we're going to see if we have a small single, or if we have a single digit growth next year in the middle or higher range, that's a fine thing. If the industry is seeing that, I think the important thing for us in the EMS industry is really keep the level of communication with our customers up, in order to really. We have an uncertainty into the whole electronics world right now, in the whole economic world, and the only thing how you can keep with it up, if the communication is flowing flawless, if it's open communication, in order that you are able to react fast towards the things which are changing, because there's so many uncertainties in the world. Like if you look at China with the COVID issue right now, nobody knows exactly what's happening in the first quarter. So do they have to do any shutdowns again? I don't think that they will, because they just opened. So, but what is the influence on when COVID is hitting hard in China? What is the influence on supply chain, on components, on manufacturing, on travel, on worldwide travel? So nobody knows exactly. So what you need to have is an ability to react fast on what is coming, and prepare yourself that you can really react fast. And communication is one of the key things that we have there. So if you ask me what I can suggest, have a strong communication in both ends. First of all, to your customer side, that's one of the key things, and also of course in the whole supply chain, and drive digitalization there, because visibility and digitalization in the supply chain will be one of the key things over the next couple of months and weeks.
Phil, any closing thoughts?
No, I go back to what Markus said. I think it is absolutely about communication and openness, and actually having the digital transformation and that provides data on the supply chain, and that's where the agility comes from. If you're going to be agile, you want to be making those fast decisions based on good data. So anything that can help that, and rest assured, we've had the most disruptive 2 to 3 years that I have ever seen in the industry. I don't think 2023 is going to be an easy ride on the back of that. I think we're going to see more disruption, so more more agility based around good data to make better decisions and drive better outcomes is what's needed.
Yeah, well said, well said. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights with our audience. We do appreciate it. I wish you a successful 2023, and hopefully we can do this again and get caught up again in the future. So continued success. Have a great year.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Eric.
You too.
Happy New Year,
Bye-bye.
everybody.